Hey everyone, welcome to This is WholeLife, live from Orlando, Florida. It's just after 9 a.m. our time. It's cool, it's brisk, it's breezy. It feels good because summer's right around the corner. You know what else is cool and breezy and brisk? We have a guest today. It's a breath of fresh air. Gotcha. It's a breath of fresh air. Now, of course, Ken's going to hear that and he's going to go, "Thanks a lot, Randy." No, that's not. But per usual, on my right is our lead pastor, Ken Wetmore, Melanie Bachman, Dr. Lucas to my left, but to the right. Okay, Melanie, you have to do it. I can't do it. I'm too excited. Mm-hmm. In the house.
Yes. AKA.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say, "I am your father."
and that's our jam. Because I actually wrote it out that way too, and you did it exactly how I was going to do it. It's actually in my notes written that way because I was going to forget. But I was like, the way you said Antonio, I was like, ooh. Like, shouldn't he be a voice actor somewhere? I mean, I don't know. You said this is your first podcast. I'm not really sure. And my first question was, out of all this, did your mom use it all? Like when you were in trouble?
Yes.
Jose. Well, how was it?
Well, she went full, like Jose Antonio Montenegro Mendez.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
My mother's maiden name is Paul.
So there's 4 if you could go.
Oh, we
can
can
add.
I can keep going.
You can, yeah.
The other one is Deokute.
Okay, so like the bigger the crime, the bigger the
bigger
the law.
Yeah, no, I got that
With
a lot.
the hits, of course.
I got that a lot. So I was just like, because you mentioned different cultures and nicknames and stuff, and I thought, this is probably, I think, moms, this has to be universal, doesn't it?
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one. Lucas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. We just don't have like the bigger names, but the hit was there.
Yeah, it was there. My mother's favorite weapon was a wooden spoon. When you go to hide underneath of something, she'd be like, "I can still get you if I get down on the ground." Yeah, we play little games. Melanie sitting over there like, "And here's a halo above my head." And nobody ever said, "Melanie, I don't know what's your middle."
Wow.
No. Is it really? Melanie Michelle.
Melanie Michelle.
Did you get the Melanie Michelle? No. That was not yours. That wasn't a thing.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I ignored the look. That's usually why I got the aforementioned wooden spoon was why.
Did you ever get the M&M? M&M, like, yeah. Okay.
All right, we've got a new one.
Yeah, Eminem.
Right. Yeah, Eminem.
Dr. Eminem.
See, he's full of good ideas. We should have had him here a long time ago. All right. So tell me how often do you go to the grocery store just blind? Like you're gonna make up a story to get your wife's grocery list.
Well, since that day, I've almost every single time I go to the grocery store, I'm creating a story now.
You're creating.
Yeah, I'm just creating. It's natural.
What's your success rate? I mean, are you batting 1,000? Or are
No, I miss it. I would say out of 10, 8. It's not too bad. It gets tricky when there's a specific brand that you need to get.
Oh, yeah.
Or the organic.
Right. Then you have to create more nuances to the story.
Oh, man. Can I ask you how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 51.
Okay, so we're about the same age.
We're about the same age.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm going to be 54 coming up here in August.
I got to say, we look good for 50s.
Well, I mean, obviously, but there is no way. I'd be batting like 200. She'd be like, eggs, milk, and cheese. And I'll be like, okay, can you send me a text? And she'd be like, you're going. She's like, Aldi is literally 3 minutes down the road. I'm like, could you send me a text, please? I'll get to the store. It's not there. I'm like, was it milk? So I'm like, oh, fine, and she'll send me a text. So, man, you're a brave man, and I'm proud of those numbers. That's legit.
Yeah, it gets tricky when you're at the store. You already created the story, and then you get a text and say, "Hey, can you add these 4 or 5 other things?"
Ooh,
So that's where it gets really
And how are you
creative.
just supposed to weave in a new character?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Every single time.
writer's block. I mean, right
Yeah,
there, right there in
exactly.
aisle 5.
At that moment, I'm like, yeah, send me a text. Yeah.
My favorite is as you swipe the last thing across the scanner and your pocket buzzes, and you're like, "Do I pay?" But I'm like, "But I have to pay because they take Apple Pay, so I'm gonna have to look at the phone." Or do I pay with my watch? Tap the fob and look over like, "You didn't catch me. I'm already in the truck. Sorry, I'm coming home." And it's like, oh.
Boy, you better hope Heather never listens to the podcast because you will be found out.
Yep.
Or is it that you, and then you have to really figure out like, well, what is it that she was wanting? Because if it's like heavy whipping cream, maybe I should, right?
Oh,
Because if I
right.
find
Right.
that out, because
Yeah.
maybe there's something.
Maybe there's pie. Or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful about that one. But
Right,
yeah, no.
right. Yes.
No, she can't listen to the podcast because she can't stay awake. And this would already be like 2 or 3 minutes in.
She's already out.
She's out. She's like, this, I used to read to her all the time. And she's like, well, now all it does is put me to sleep. So, I can't be listening to the podcast. This week kicks off, and I'm going to say this. I say it every year. Voices of WholeLife, my absolute favorite.
Yes.
Favorite message series, only because I feel like we get the best of what our members have to offer, because you're going to get something that you're preparing for it, and we have 4 this year.
We have 4.
And we're doing it a little bit different. You guys are probably used to listening. If you've been a long time listener, you'd know that usually 4 or 5, and we would just put them all in the same month, like one right after the other.
Right.
And this was, I don't know, was this your idea, Melanie? To
I don't know.
spread it
Ken
out?
and I talked about it, and we thought, what if we spread it out so that we have something to look forward to every quarter.
It's not just one and done,
Yeah.
like the whole thing.
Yep.
So every time you get this run up to it, and then you get to meet somebody new, even though I'm not going to meet you right now, but it's your first podcast, so I kind of feel a little bit like we're meeting for the first time. And then you get a perspective that someone who, now you're a chaplain. Are you ordained minister as well?
I'm an ordained minister,
Okay.
a Seventh-day Adventist ordained minister. Yes.
You're official.
I'm official.
Officially official. So have you ever pastored a church
Yes,
before?
I was a pastor in the Georgia with the
Okay.
Georgia with South Atlantic Conference.
Okay.
I was a pastor for about 8 years.
Wow. What area?
It was south of Atlanta,
South of Atlanta.
Jonesboro, Forest Park area.
Oh, okay. I'm a little not super familiar, but I know where it is. Cool. And then what brought you south?
So I decided to go back to school to do my Master's of Divinity at Andrews.
Okay.
And there, one of my classmates was doing CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Education, to become a chaplain. And that caught my attention. And I did my first unit while I was at seminary. It was a summer intensive unit in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with a Lutheran hospital.
Fort Wayne.
Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I would travel from Andrews to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to do that CP unit, and honestly, it just felt like home. This is where I needed to be with people in the difficult moments of their lives, and it felt really, really good. I felt that's where God was leading me to go, and I switched over to chaplaincy, and then I went back to Atlanta, but as a chaplain with the Emory Healthcare System.
All right.
And I worked with them for about 11 and a half years. And then I got a call from the director here. It was a text, actually. He sent me a text. He's like, hey, do you know of a chaplain with these qualifications? And I'm like, yeah, I do.
Yeah,
and
you're talking to him.
and I sent it over to Janet, and she's like, let's go, because she wanted to get closer to the warmer weather. She doesn't like the cold weather. And we just started the conversation, and this is where I am now since 2021.
Who was the director at that time?
Edwin Alicea.
It was Edwin.
Yes.
I
yes,
love Edwin.
Yeah, Edwin Alicea. And I knew Edwin from college. He was when I was in my senior year of college, he was coming in as the church pastor for the university. So we knew each other.
Gotcha.
And we were able to break down walls in regards to, the music and things like that. Yeah, it was fun.
Nice. Well, if you have ever had the pleasure of having yourself or one of your family members over at Orlando campus at Advent Health, ask for Tony. That's all I was going to say. Ask for Tony. We had my little one was there a little while ago, and JT was everything and then some, taking care of us.
Thank
and so
you.
the chaplains and all the chaplain team there is, I know most of them, and they're all amazing, and they all participated. You guys, I'm going to put in the show notes if you haven't seen. Some of you probably have not. Kind Tweets from God. We did a
Yeah,
little
that was
series.
wonderful. That was awesome to do.
Yeah. And so I'll put that into the Discord channel and into today's show notes. So swipe up or go to the Discord channel and check that out, because you'll get a chance to actually see Tony on camera and some of the other people, Edwin, some of the other people that we're talking about. So definitely check that out. Well, man, I didn't see.
And members of the church, they come here.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the other part. We get to know a little bit better, which is fun, because I had no idea. I mean, I think I did hear, I think you did say that during the message that you had been a pastor before. Was it? Or is
I
that
don't
just
remember.
me making
I
it
don't
up in my
think
head?
so. I think
I
it
don't
was
think I
just
did.
pastoral presence
presence.
that gave it away.
Yeah, probably. It wasn't your first message.
No,
No,
it
I
wasn't.
didn't. No.
I think I was 13, 14 when I preached my first sermon
Nice.
at church in a Spanish congregation.
Was this message brand new, recycled?
This one?
Today? Yeah.
No,
Or
this was brand new.
brand new.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always curious if it's like, well, I was really busy, I had to grab one from the archives, or or did we have something specific? No, that would.
No, I think it fit well, because when Melanie called me and I said, yeah, I would love to do that. I looked at the date and it fell right near Purim.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, this would be kind of fun to do. So I actually pitched, I think, like 3 ideas to Melanie. She's like, no, I think we need to go in this direction, which I
That was
loved.
perfect.
Yeah,
It just lined up, especially with the holiday and everything. And so yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. Purim.
Purim. It's one of the minor holidays for the Jewish community, but they try to celebrate it as best they can.
Oh, I love it. I'm with you. I think we should all do it. That's pretty cool. Just thinking about that, but I've never heard of it it was just to remember the story of Esther. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. One of the things I thought about was, like, I think we've probably all read the kids' version. Well, if you're a parent, you've probably read the kids' version more than a couple 100,000 times. And even in the regular, if you hear a message, it doesn't usually come with, I mean, I guess it's insinuated, but that she kept the fact that she was a Jew
Secret.
just secret. Like, before Haman's decree, was there an issue with? I mean, I know that they were obviously, living in another land and all of that, but was that a secret for most Jews, or did they no? Or was there something like, hey, you're going to go in this pageant, but there's no way you could win if you're.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were foreigners. They were people who had been conquered and spread out, which is the word that Jose used, the diaspora. And so definitely they weren't at the top of the social echelon. So I'm not sure exactly why she decided to keep it a secret. I think her cousin Mordecai told her to keep it a secret, but
yeah, in the story, it doesn't say, but my suspicion is that Mordecai and Haman already had some issues prior to what we read. So I'm wondering because that advice came from Mordecai.
That was a fair amount of escalation. Probably.
I'm wondering if that was already in play.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Well, during this celebration and reading the book, you had a quote from Hallberg who said that when we celebrate together, it's our history and lives and breaths in the minds of people. And I was like, that's a pretty cool idea if you just stop and think a little bit. And it made me think of, and I don't know how this really comes together, but what would whole life's celebration be? It seems like there's some similarities to the story of Esther, the second coming. There's people oppressed, they're waiting. Well, they're waiting for now we're celebrating the deliverance while we wait for our final deliverance. But like, what would whole life's Magala as a people, like right now, what has God brought us through that we would celebrate? And would it even be appropriate to, is that, taking someone else's culture and saying, oh, we're going to celebrate too? Or
I don't think so. I mean, think about the big celebration that we're planning for next year for our centennial, our 100th anniversary of being the hospital church, and just kind of remembering why this church was established in the first place and where we've come since then. Maybe we need to have more celebrations. I can think of lots of reasons to celebrate, but that would be one big one that we're intentionally remembering and celebrating together.
And I think we do that throughout the year as a church. I mean, we have the barn party. That for me is a type of celebration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have Black History concerts. That's a type of celebration. Anything that will help us remember the core of who we are as a church is a celebration.
The other one I thought about was COVID and how our church is really more so than maybe a lot of churches that we know of, just even locally, that survived pretty well, but were so intentional and spent money to continue to produce, church virtually, Sabbath schools virtually, and really caring about the worship experience that we were creating every week here. And thinking of how long that, people waited to come back to church. And towards the end, it was like, oh, do we have to watch church from home again? Are we watching online again? But in that same way, I feel like that was something that, the church did that not everybody decided was the right, and maybe it wasn't right for everybody, but it just, like the growth that we see now, and just thinking about when I went downstairs, I looked at the lobby. Freud got this great new welcome center table. There's new signage. There's all this stuff that's happened. And Saturday I was really thinking about just listening to the message, and I was kind of all over the place. There was lots of things going wrong in different places around the church Saturday morning. So I was all over the place. But as I was standing there and watching even just the people coming in and out of the worship center, and I was like, this is, it really hit me how different and how many different people populate our church now comparatively to before COVID started. And, people did and moved. And I mean, it's kind of hard because Florida's pretty transient anyway. There's people come and go every day. But just like how many people, there's I counted like 12 that I could for sure remember were like, oh yeah, I remember them from being here from before then. I'm sure there's many more than 12. But just from the people that I saw, and everyone else, at least at the moment, was like, wow, that's a new person. And so I kind of felt like that's something that we could just celebrate, that, coming through that time and getting to where we are now, and just finding people that are finding home, all the baptisms, 4 in one morning. That was a lot of fun.
And having Jeff and Tammy come back.
Oh. Yes.
Yeah. I missed, sorry, Tammy, Jeff. I tried to I was looking and I was scouting, but I could not find you afterwards. And so I was hoping to get a little hug and FaceTime, but next time. So
I like the word intentionality, intentional that you use, because, I've seen the service, I've experienced the service. I said, wow, I leave, church on Sabbath. I'm like, oh, that was beautiful. But being there in the back, let's say, just the intention of everything that goes into making this experience true and real. that for me is a cause of celebration because I got home and I was like, I am tired. And I cannot imagine doing this every single Saturday. So the intentionality, I think we need to honor that.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. I mean, I have thought that in the same way. There are quite a few weeks on Saturday when we get home in the afternoon, and it's like I just want to take a nap, and and there's always something like, hey, let's go hiking. You sure? I think we should go kayaking. Are you sure nobody wants to take a nap? And then it's like we'll lay down for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So yeah, I feel that it is one of the things though that as much as it does take just a ton of work, a ton of planning, more meetings than anyone really wants to sit through. When people come and visit, though, and people that are online that have never been here are like, man, we count on that hour to recharge, to just to worship and to be together. And I thought, and I didn't write this down, but you did mention something about us coming together as a group in worship. And it really felt like this week I did get a chance to pop in for a little bit, and not that it's probably any different than any other week because it's good all the time. But there was a really good just overall, and I don't know, I hate the word vibe because that's so overused, but just the feeling of just being together that felt really, really good this week. And I was like, wow, this is, and maybe it's just the fact that everyone's excited because there's somebody different that's speaking. And, I think this is a lot of other people's favorite week. And, now not all together, but really enjoys to hear that message. When you were preparing, was there anything that you kind of came across and said, oh, Melanie's only going to give me 25 minutes? So I can't go there, but I'd really like to tell this story or this part of this story. Anything that didn't make the final message? Well, I'm sure there probably was something.
Yeah, there were a few things. One of the things that we were discussing with Melanie was about, how should I put this in a way that's right. But I'll put it this way. The king was an adolescent boy. And
really?
Yeah,
wow.
Because, he called on his wife. His wife didn't come, and now
He
I'm
means this
pouting.
metaphorically.
Yes. And now he's pouting, and then he gets all his friends to make this decision because, the story says that the nobles encourage him to kick her out.
Ooh.
Vashti, his first wife.
His first wife.
Yeah, because she
Why?
didn't obey.
Because she didn't obey.
She didn't show up when he wanted her
Exactly.
to show up.
And now they're saying, hey, if you don't do anything, our wives are going to get up against us. That's the adolescent part and immaturity. And I'll just say it, what's the word?
Misogyny.
Misogyny. This male culture. And that's one of the points that we didn't mention. And I think it was okay, but it's there in that story.
That's why Xerxes doesn't really get applauded or booed because he ultimately does the right thing. But yeah, he's not really a hero.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Esther has to be the hero.
Esther and Mordecai.
And actually,
Mordecai.
and Vashti. Because she stood up. She's like, I'm not going to play your little games. Because they were going to bring her for her to show off her beauty. So I'm not going to play your little game. I'm just going to stay here and do what I need to do for myself.
Well, do we know what happens to Vashti by any chance?
We were talking about that.
Yeah. And
she was put away.
Yes.
So we were discussing amongst ourselves whether put away meant put away or put away.
Yeah.
We figured
like
probably put away.
Yeah, like when your puppy dies and then your parents tell you, oh, they're at a puppy farm.
Oh.
Yeah,
She might have gone to the Queen farm.
There's nowhere to go.
I was this days old when I found out that. Wow, put away. Well, that seems logical considering that, I mean, she's not really supposed to go, even Esther's not supposed to go before the king without an invitation. for fear of death, being put away. So that would seem logical. Wow, that's a harsh. I mean, I guess she probably knew what she was getting into, I suppose, but that's a tough stance to take when you pretty much know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what you're getting into, she didn't choose herself. She got chosen. My guess is Vashti probably was chosen as well. So I don't think it was like a love match where they were like, we have a lot in common. Let's do a life together. I think probably there was not a lot of power. And so Vashti exercising what tiny bit of autonomy that she had was a pretty brave thing.
Yeah, for sure, because it was probably not unknown to her what the result of disobedience was going to be, particularly that. Wow, that's man, that just makes my mind go in a ton of different places.
Oh, that's Jose's next sermon. Vashti.
Your mind in a ton of different places. No, that's so if Purim is about remembering, what do I have to remind myself of what God has done in my life? When you said that, it was like, which one would you pick of the things that God has done in your life? I mean, most of us haven't lived the Esther story or the heroic part of, we're going to save an entire race of people across a pretty wide section of the kingdom. What it would 27 different
127.
127. That's right. And I mean that's a big deal. So what do I have that's comparable? And I probably don't have something comparable to that. But that's what I've been thinking about was, what do I have? What has God done that makes someone later just go, wow, that was big, huge, wild, and I don't think I do.
Does it have to be big and huge? I think it can be just momentous. Just, wow, this is something I want to remember or think about.
I remember hearing the testimony of someone when I was younger, and I was like, oh, wow, that's such a amazing story, amazing miracle story. I don't have that. I mean, I have my own story, which is great. But it doesn't have to be the big miraculous things. It could be just small little things that we can say, oh, I can see God in that. Thank you, God, for that.
Does that mean that maybe God's just been carrying closer maybe some of the people that don't have?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's a blessing because growing up, you used to hear that a lot. Well, this person was a Satan worshiper, and they did, all these different things, and they were saved miraculously, and all this stuff. You're like, wow, I'm over here playing with Lincoln Logs. I don't know where my story fits in, but maybe those that say, well, my story's kind of boring, or I don't really have a story. Maybe that's the story, is that you don't have the detours and some of the pain, and all those big stories come with collateral damage, and usually a fair amount of it that you survive. That's why it's the big story. That's why people go, whoa, this is amazing. So, but maybe the opposite of that is just, hey, I got it more right more often, and maybe more from the beginning.
Well, I think the idea of remembering is the word that we were using earlier, the intentionality. Because I think sometimes things happen and we think, oh, wow, that was cool. And then because we don't intentionally remember it, it slips away. And so I think that intentional act of remembering, and maybe even having like that little symbol or representation of that moment that helps us continue to remember, can make those moments stand out and not just disappear. I remember when I was trying to decide if I was going to go do PhD work or not, and I had submitted my application and I was waiting to hear back. And in the meantime, I was speaking at a women's conference, and part of what they had planned for this women's conference was a quote unquote message in a bottle, where they gave you this, just randomly, you got this little tiny bottle with a message from God in it, kind of like the kind tweets. And I had just told everybody about this experience of waiting and kind of not knowing and feeling anxious about, well, what's going to happen? Are we going to move? Am I going to do this thing for the next few years of my life? And I opened my little message in the bottle, and it was something to the effect of, you don't have to have all the answers right now. Be still and know that I'm God. And it was like, oh, okay. And so I kept this little, it's literally about 2 inches tall, this little bottle that had a message in it, only because in that moment I was like, oh, you know what? This was a moment in my life where I was up against something that was causing me anxiety and I didn't have answers. And this was just a little reminder, hey, next time this happens and you don't have the answers and you're feeling anxious, remember this little message in a bottle. So it's literally 2 inches tall, and that's one of my little reminders.
Is that in your office somewhere right next to your little Jesus?
It is at home. It is not next to my Jesus, but yes, it's at home.
You can't keep your little Jesus out and around.
Not anymore. Kids come around and collect little Jesuses.
They're still looking, which, that's what we're supposed to do. So you can't say too much, I guess. So at the end of the day, when we think about Esther, there's a lot of ways that the lessons that we learn, what has God done in our life? What has God done in our church? What do you think the aftermath, and maybe there's not much known about it, but what happened, because you leave on a high note, obviously. Haman was up high. He was put away. And, and so the good guys win. But, and I don't know if it means anything or not, but it just seems like something that the Bible doesn't often tell us, like the aftermath of things. It just leaves it there. But best guess, like what happens after this? I mean, what comes after this that this, it's still obviously influencing us today because we still talk about it. We still read the story. What's the outcome of that story? And maybe it's not like super important or anything, but it just made me wonder what happens after something like this. Like, how do you top this? Or like, what else is your legacy? Apparently nothing else God thought the Bible needed to know about.
Well, obviously everyone lived happily ever after.
Well, that's what I was thinking. And probably.
And Mordecai was the right-hand man after that. And
yeah.
But, I think when people listen to the story of Esther, and actually the ending is a lot bloodier than we actually got into. There was actually more than one massacre that took place. And so even the ending of that story has a little bit of an ick factor. But I think the thing that Mordecai told Esther in that moment of her fear and decision making was, maybe you're put here for such a time as this. And so I wonder if that's the thing we take away, wherever we are, whatever situation we're in, is the significance that I'm here for such a time as this, for this reason, to do this thing.
And that's a tough one to decide. I mean, and obviously she struggled with it. Like, hey, is this? Like, because if not, I'm getting put away. And me and Vashti are down together and we're having another pageant next month. So, I mean, obviously that was a huge thing. And that's something we all struggle with. But, wow.
One of the things I always try to remind myself, and even patients in the hospital, life is complex. Life is hard. And you have to take it day by day. Yes, you have this high moment of Esther experience, but then tomorrow is going to be a different day. How can that experience ground you to face whatever life will throw at you the next day? I like the word attunement. If I could attune to being in the present moment, in the here and now, and how can I experience God right now, even in the complexity of life? I think that for me would be a takeaway. Can I sense God in the small little things, in the difficult things of life? If I can do that, I am going to be okay, regardless of the outcomes.
Wow, that's really good. Because that's probably all. I don't know. The story. It doesn't seem like she's loaded with confidence when she goes in to see him the first time, and like, okay, we prayed, and we're gonna do this. We're gonna we're gonna invite him to dinner, and then we're gonna do it again. It just seems like there's not.
You know what? How smart for her to know him and know who he was, and kind of know the way to his heart, and to know what. I mean, she handled him seriously according to who he was, and so the decisions that she made and the strategy that she used to bring him to a place where he would be most able to hear her request, I think was pretty brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Directly post dinner, maybe after the dessert.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's usually what I'm like.
When their minds are already like,
Ooh. It's like, wow. That was...
All right. Well, maybe it was pretty basic. I don't know.
No.
After dessert, bam.
No, but you're right. But the strategy she had to have known, because it just seems like in the lead up to it, you're fraught with, man, she's not going to make it. He's going to just like, I mean, he just, like you said, you just put away the other queen. So was she that much more beautiful than Vashti that she was immune from it? It doesn't seem that way. It seems like she was in peril every bit as much. So that, the courage there is the one that's always like, dare to be a Daniel, and I'll be like, well, I don't know. I think you have to throw Esther into that mix as well, because she was even at more of a disadvantage, I feel like, than he was. So
yeah,
maybe we got the song wrong.
VeggieTales comes to mind. And if you watch the VeggieTale version, it was her voice it's her singing voice that really convinced everyone
that is true. She was beautiful, but that voice. Yeah. And the girl in front of her was horrible. She had that squeaky bad voice that totally put her out of the running. So anyway.
There's something about, Esther, that point where she says, if I perish, I perish. It's similar to the three Hebrew young men in the pit of fire.
Yeah.
Where if we're not going to bow to you, and if we die, we die. It's their sense of this blind trust that they had in God. I think that's something we need to try to imitate as best we can. And, one of the things that I've learned working at the hospital and being around some difficult, challenging cases is that because I don't have everything under control, I need to fully try to trust God in that. It's hard. It is difficult.
Yeah.
But if I can get to that point where I can say, okay, whatever will happen, that is really hard to do. But can I get there? I want to get there.
Well, can we get there by actually planning to be there? I mean, I think we're there whether we like it or not when you're in one of those cases and you're sitting in the hospital wondering how things are going to, what course everything is going to take and what's the outcome. I mean, you're kind of there. You're kind of stuck with, well, whatever God decides is what's going to happen. But I'd rather get there where you could enter that space in that frame of mind instead of, well, here I am, so I guess this is it. Like we're just gonna wait, and that's really hard too. It's not like even if you achieve that, it's not like you're sitting there going, man, this is great.
Yeah, exactly.
This is great.
Yeah.
I wish I could do this more often.
I think you don't know who you are in hard moments until you show up in the hard moment, and so, I don't know how well you can plan for something you haven't experienced before. You can develop relationship. You can look, like Jose said, at those pre events that led up to this sense of trust. But when you arrive in that moment and you're fresh to that moment, you don't necessarily know who you are until then. And sometimes you don't know how much strength you actually have until you arrive in that moment. So sometimes it's a good surprise.
Yeah. Well, I think the other part of that, and just like I mentioned earlier, that, having you at the hospital when we were there in a time that, of course, there's all kinds of things going on. There's testing, there's stress, and even just having someone that and that you trust. And it's like, well, how come I can't trust God? Well, I can't see God the same way I can see when it's like, hey, have you guys had lunch? And I was like, oh, did we eat since yesterday? I'm not sure. And then all of a sudden lunch appears in 2 white bags and one of each of your hands. You're like, oh. And just thinking about that makes you, maybe part of this is, they really came together. There were people praying on her side and on Mordecai's side, all on board for the same thing. We got to save our people, and you're the only hope that we have. And I feel just knowing that you have that support. And I know church gets a bad rap in a lot of places, but if there are people and, it's like, well, it's an hour a week, maybe 2 if you, go to a Bible study class, maybe 3 if you hang out for a while and talk. But how many things do you do for 3 hours a week that really brings you community, that brings you support, that bring you an opportunity to have a network of support? So in that way, maybe the most important thing that we do, whether or not you're here every week, is to have that support, is to be here and know that, you have someone who you can trust in your corner. Yeah. And it should make everything we do a little easier, right? Yeah. Well, I'm really saddened to say that there were no questions this week because
we have.
Do we?
From the anonymous Brazilian.
The anonymous Brazilian. Please do, Dr. Lucas.
Yes. So, how does the celebration of Purim serve as a reminder of God's faithfulness?
Well, I think it goes back to that. What are we expecting an angel to come down and here you go?
I'd like that sometimes.
Yeah, I would love that every single day. That would be great. And I for me, is how can I see God's faithfulness in the little things, in the small little things? Because if I see God in the small things, I'm able to see God in the bigger things. And if I'm able to see God in the small little things of life, those will be the ones that I think sustain me the most. In those small little things, like when I walk into a room and I see a baby smiling, that right there demonstrates the faithfulness of God to that family that had been trying for years to have a baby, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're pregnant. They have this little miracle baby. That for me demonstrates the faithfulness of God. And if I can see that every day, that strengthens me.
Nice.
Yeah.
But not everything is going to be maybe the question is, they celebrated across the country by everyone. It said that's really cool. But I guess they had something that unified them, their survival, which is not nothing. Yeah. And maybe it's harder for us because it's not always even though, like Melanie mentioned before, there was a little ickiness to the end of the story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ickiness that we still deal with every day in life now. How would we come together in large numbers to celebrate what God has done? What would we choose to be unifying now that would cause that many people to celebrate what God has done?
Well, and I think we can. So let's complexify it just a little bit more.
Oh, please.
Because the book of Esther talks about them fasting, doesn't talk about them praying. And actually, one of the reasons the book of Esther has gotten so much attention is because God's name is not in the book anywhere at all. And there have been theologians who have said, what is this book even doing here? This book should not even be in the canon because of this omission. But yet people were able to find God at work in the situation that was there and the things that happened and ultimately that the people were saved from destruction. So maybe it's one of those things where we have to broaden and think bigger. Maybe every movement of God is not overtly religious or is not specifically the result of us praying a particular thing. Maybe God's actions and God's presence is woven through all of our lives, and the intentionality of thinking about that and remembering those moments can bring that to light.
I like that. See? All we had to do was just wait just a little bit longer. And then we wrapped it up with a nice tiny little bow.
I was going to say the other side of the experiences that I have with families is I remember I walked into a room and it was a very difficult case. And the parents told me, we are in God's hands. Whatever happens, we know God is in the midst of everything. Unfortunately, the patient did pass away, but they were grateful for the support. They were grateful for the time they had with the baby. And it just demonstrated this deep trust in God's presence of this family. That, for me, took a lot of courage to say, whatever happens will happen, and we see God here. And for me, that's the type of faith I want to have. That's the type of God I want to remember, that God is in the good, in the bad, in every situation. And it doesn't have to be overly religious. It could just be, I'm here. That for me is a sign of faith and deep faith and trust in God's.
Yeah, even if there's a different ending to the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, God's still there.
God's still there.
So now we uncomplicated it. I like that. That seems very simple, very straightforward. So.
Well, Jose just put a bigger bow on top of it.
No. Well, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to let you guys go a little bit earlier than usual this week, only by about 10 minutes or so. But I feel like that last little bit, that takeaway is really, really something that if we can try to remember that and put that into practice or more than we probably do now or maybe have been in the past, it could be something that's really just really helpful, not only to us, but, like you said, when you run into people like that are just like, well, I'm content with whatever, kind of like it is well with my soul. I'm here. Mm-hmm. I'm good. I trust God. And the more we can emulate that, I think the more attractive that is, because the calm, you just don't find a lot of calm anymore. It doesn't seems like it's all a little more amped up than that, but being able to stay calm and just have that trust and that peace that's often just really hard to just pin down and find and then actually rest in it. So I think that's pretty good. JT, thank you for taking time to come over, not only but preach twice. I mean, that's the thing. We ask a lot here. We make you do it the first time, the second time, and then we make you come and do the podcast besides. So thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate
this was
your
really
time.
Fun.
Awesome. And next week
we have Freud Braz.
Freud Braz.
That's right.
Speaking
New
on
ID.
But you won't hear from him unless you email Freud at WholeLife.church and tell him, please do the podcast. He's doing it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's just the way.
Arm twisting there.
That's the way I feel.
Where Andy's asking for.
Maybe invite him to do the podcast in French.
There you go.
Oh, well, he'd be doing it by himself, unless any of the rest of you guys know French. I'm doing all I can with English here, guys. This is maxing me out, so it won't be of any use that way. But And so it'll be Freud. And then the week after that is church retreat.
Nope, we have Ken back for a week.
Oh, that's right. Ken back for a week
And
and
then we
then
have
church
church
retreat.
retreat.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not make church retreat. I mean,
Yes,
I'm
don't
anxious,
rush.
But let's not rush it. We have...
Let's not make it happen faster than it needs to.
we're still shooting videos, and one tonight at 7 p.m. actually. So we are not done yet. So please give us a little time.
Yeah.
So JT, thank you, and just thank you for that message. It was a lot to. It felt good. There was a lot to think about. There's still a lot to process. Overall, it ends well, and it's something positive to think about. Overall, it just felt really good to worship and around this message. And I don't know, Esther's one of my favorite stories, and so I just really, really enjoyed it. So I think if that's it, anybody else? Is there another Brazilian on the line?
No. Enough of them.
Enough. All right, guys. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
listening, and have a great week.